Hey guys, welcome to Let's Discuss Cafe, where we bring you inspiring conversations with industry leaders and trailblazers who are shaping the future of law. Joining us today is Sampriti Sridhar, a distinguished corporate lawyer currently working at Lakeshore India Management Private Limited. So far, she has been doing remarkably well in her career. She has worked with top firms like AZB Partners and BlackRock. She also did LLM from the prestigious Columbia Law School. Stay tuned as we explore her experiences, insights, and the evolving landscape of corporate law in India. Hey Sampriti, welcome to Let's Discuss podcast.
Hi, Avinash. Thank you for having me. It's really a great opportunity to be here.
We also feel the same way. So, from Chennai to Mumbai and even New York City, you have had quite the geographical journey in your career. Could you share a memorable anecdote from your time working in these diverse legal landscapes?
I think, Avinash, mine has been a classic case of being at the right place at the right time and having the right kind of people guide me. In my very first job, which was in Chennai way back in 2011, a senior of mine, who was also my first boss, he had kind of observed that my personality was very shy and reserved. And he advised me to go abroad and get a master's because he felt that for me to survive in this cutthroat corporate world, that I needed to develop a little bit of a thick skin to come out of my shell, my comfort zone, to be confident, to express my point of view. And I was a bit reticent in that aspect. Well, I heard him out and I never really went ahead and did my master's the minute he told me to. But I moved to another law firm called Amarchand and Mangaldas. And that's where I had my first exposure to lawyers from different parts of the country, from the best law schools. And it was a very challenging and demanding environment. I worked there for 2 years and I somehow managed it. Then I went and did my master's in New York. And initially going from Chennai to New York, it was so intimidating. But I think that experience made me stronger, very, very confident. I ended up taking a lot of classes, which required me to give my point of view, to speak up. It really pushed me out of my comfort zone. And I think that all of this is what has made me what I am today. So I very often go back to what my first boss told me about how I needed to develop certain personality traits to be able to survive in this world. And I can't get by being the shy, reserved girl that I was at 21. And I'm so thankful for that advice because I keep thinking about it and I keep looking at my journey from how I was to how I am now. And that has always stuck with me.
So, let me ask an open-ended question. How much did you spend for the LLM?
The LLM is not very cheap at all.
Right.
And also because I did my LLM at New York, and New York is the financial capital of the world, very, very expensive. So the LLM back in 2015, which is when I went, was about 50,000 US dollars,
Right.
the tuition alone. I'm sure it's a lot more now. Some time has passed. And apart from that, I would say it depends on how you choose to live there, the kind of place you decide to rent your apartment in. But I would say maybe another 20,000 for just living expenses, which you can support. You can also get part-time jobs. In all of these law schools, you could become a research assistant with a professor, which will give you some kind of extra money. It's not much, but it's still extra. It won't fund your rent, but it's still some extra cash. So I did do an RA position as well when I was there. But in terms of actually funding the LLM, it was a mixed bag of some help from my family, the bank, and some of my savings because I'd worked for 3.5 years.
Okay. So you are the lucky few whose parents can, at least partially fund their education or foreign education to be more precise.
Grateful for that. Yeah.
Right. So you have spent close to $70,000 to $80,000 in pursuing the LLM. What happened next? Did you wanted to work there or you didn't want to work there? You wanted to come back? What was your plan?
I was very clear in my mind. I eventually wanted to come back to India, never had plans of settling there. I think it was to do with wanting to be closer to family, closer to home. But I did want to work for a year or two. So usually after your LLM, you get 1 year where the visa allows you to work without any sponsorship. So you could use that time. And I think my plan was always to just work for that 1 year. And it is very, very hard to find a job, to be honest. Like, I have stories of friends who sent out like 500 resumes and then you eventually get through. Similarly, even in my case, like I sent out multiple resumes and I think it took me like months before I landed that role at BlackRock for a year. But even my position was just for a year. And it really was a very good experience that I had. But I was very clear in my head that at the end of that, I wanted to come back home.
So there are some listeners who want to pursue higher education for the sake of, shifting the jurisdiction or finally settling in a foreign country. Do you think LLM is a good option for that?
Yes, if you're thinking of actually moving base and settling in the US and restarting your career over there, like LLM is the first step that you could go. You do an LLM and then you write the bar exam over there. Then you can apply for jobs. But the whole process of finding that job, I'm being very honest with you, it's not just in my experience, but I know a lot of people who have also been through that process. It takes a long time and it's not that easy. But I think if you don't give up and you keep persisting, it could happen, but it takes time, like 3-4 months, 4-5 months. But the only thing is, there will be a period where you will probably not have a job and you need to fund yourself. You're living over there after your master's, after the bar exam. So you're just like, don't have any source of income coming in, but you're just sitting there looking for jobs. So I think that's when people give up and decide to go back home. It does take a long time, but I think if anyone wants to shift base and start their career in a different country, especially in the US, the LLM is a great first step to getting there.
So do you have any experience where you can compare the chances of getting a job vis-a-vis LLM compared to any other professional degree, for instance, MBA or Master's in Sociology or something of that sort?
I think when you get an MBA, you could very easily get a job in the US
Right.
after that. Again, I may be wrong in this because this is not my profession, so I have very limited knowledge. I can just compare, like I was at Columbia and I did the master's in law from Columbia. And the chances of an LLM getting a job after that, even if you got great grades, was very less.
Somewhere around 30%, 40%.
Yeah, yeah. It's just like a handful of people versus an MBA, someone at a Columbia Business School, you have like a 95 plus chance of getting a job. And this is just what I observed. So I think the main thing is because for lawyers especially, they need to justify as to why they're hiring a foreign lawyer versus a local. And mostly the local, the Americans, the program that they do is called the Juris Doctor program. So that's for 3 years. So when you do the Juris Doctor program, especially from law schools like Harvard and Columbia, like you will get a job. It's a done deal by your first year that you're going to get a job at a great law firm. So, but only thing is it's for 3 years. So either you have the option to do the LLM and wait it out and struggle for several months trying to look for jobs. And, it's a gamble. You may or may not get one. Versus if you do a Juris Doctor program, which is 3 years and it's a lot more harder, there is more chances of getting a job for sure.
And it's a lot more expensive as well, right?
Yeah, because it's 3 years. But
Yeah.
I can tell you that if you do a Juris Doctor program, especially from top law schools, by the first year, you will have a job, unless you're like doing really badly.
Right. That's what even I have observed. A lot of students come to me and say, like, we want to permanently shift to Canada or US. My advice is, like, if that is your primary motivation, then LLM is not a good option. MBA, I would say, is better option. It's a lot safer option compared to LLM. But if you want to learn law, if you want to learn from some of the most prestigious university, acquiring knowledge is your objective, then LLM might make sense.
Yeah. And that is precisely the reason why I did an LLM myself. It was not to go and find a job over there and move. And in fact, when a lot of people come to me for advice and say that, but I want to get a job there, so what do you recommend? I'm like, listen, it's a gamble. You may or you may not. It's going to take you a really long time. I do know people who have stuck it out for like 5 months and eventually landed a job. But it just, you never know what's going to happen. It's not like a sure shot as opposed to like getting a job after an MBA.
Obviously, you can't make a specific statement, but you must have friends like who have, immigrated from here and got a job there. So what is the general work-life comparison between working in a law firm here in India versus working in a law firm in the US?
Honestly, I worked at two national law firms in Bombay. One is AZB and Partners. And before my LLM, I'd worked at Amarchand and Mangaldas, which is a national law firm, but I was based in Chennai. And these firms are so competitive and challenging. The hours are really long that it's not too much of a difference, to be honest, between like how you work over here versus how you work in a law firm in New York. You're trained from like day one to deliver to the client in like tight timelines, which means pulling in the hours, spending long days and weekends in the office. So if you're looking at like working hours, honestly, like if you work in these law firms, like the national law firms like AZB, Trilegal, Amarchand, Ketan, you won't see too much of a difference between the work culture over here versus abroad, because you are pulling in the same kind of hours that people will probably do in New York. And you're trained to be able to deal with such demanding clients as well.
And what about the kind of work you do? The kind of work that is assigned to you? Because I have heard the US, it's all about hyper specialization. Like I'm a trademark attorney. You won't be a trademark attorney. You will be specializing in opposition, right? Then you will also kind of specialize in certain type of clients. So if you compare this with India, we don't have that culture of hyper specialization. So is my understanding correct, or is it just a myth?
To some extent, yeah, this is like very, very specialized. So when I was in my first two jobs in Chennai, the team was much smaller. So we were all expected to work on anything and everything from like capital markets to a title diligence to an M&A deal. But when I was at AZB and Partners, my area of practice became a lot more specialized. I was only doing real estate M&A. It was very specific to real estate sector and M&A deals in that space. But again, like from what you said in the US, even in a specialization, there are subgroups to that, right? It was not that specific. But yeah, like when I was at AZB, to some extent, like I was mainly working on just real estate M&A deals because that was a team that I was part of.
So my question was, general law firms in the US, you have to kind of get hyper specialized down the line. My question was, is my understanding correct? Versus if you compare this with normal law firms, you are specializing, but you don't go into hyper specialization with people who were working in law firm in the US.
So if I understand your question correctly, I think you don't have to, like it does get very hyper specialized in the US, but I think over here it doesn't get to that extent. You know, we
Right.
all have our practice areas, but again, like in my previous law firm, like I may have done real estate M&A, but if there is an opinion on something else that, you know, a client has asked us, we have worked on that as well. So I have done other kind of deals here and there, but majority of mine was specific to a particular sector. And I personally feel that it should never get that hyper specialized that you're only able to opine on one particular area of law, right? Like as a lawyer, you should be able to have an idea of what's going on from a holistic point of view. Like you should have a general idea about what's going on. So I think my opinion is that it should never get that specific to like if in IP, you can't just be working on trademarks and opposition, like, you know, that is really specific that tomorrow, if a client asks you something to do with another area of intellectual property law, you may not end up knowing it because as your career progresses, then you start reading up on only that particular small area of law and you kind of have like blinders on about everything else. And I don't think you should ever forget about the other parts of law and you should generally have an idea about what's going on.
Right. Well said there. So let's start with BlackRock. How was it working with BlackRock?
It was a great experience. It was very different from my previous jobs. I was helping with mainly research and their publications. So that way it was very different, but it was also very new to me because I was dealing with a lot of like US related laws. So it was very different, but generally the experience of like working in such a big organization for a year, like, you know, with amazingly intelligent lawyers was great.
So what kind of work you were doing there?
Like I said, like, you know, basically it was not to do with the kind of work I was doing in law firms. It was very academic. So BlackRock published a lot of papers on different areas of law, and there was a lot of their views and their point of view on what should be the law, what should change, right? I was helping them a lot in writing these articles and these papers.
So let me ask you a little controversial question.
Yes.
Where did you enjoy working more, AZB or Amachan Mangaldas?
AZB. Yeah, I think I enjoyed working at AZB more. I never thought I would say that, but but the hours were long and it was very demanding. But I learned a lot in my 4.5 years over there, and it's definitely like shaped me in a way that I never could imagine. In terms of the kind of work that I was exposed to as well, and the deals that I was put on and worked with like great teams, AZB was the better experience for me. And also, AZB has a lesser hierarchy. It's more like you could be at a junior to mid-level and you could walk into a senior partner's room and have a discussion, which I liked a lot more because Amachan has a lot more hierarchy.
Right. Okay, that's nice. I wanted to explore the possibility, like, you didn't graduate from a national law university.
Yes.
And then you ended up working for some of the most premier law firms in India. So I see a lot of students who come to me and say that, sir, I'm a non-national law student. I can't even dream about working for AZP or Amachan. So what special thing did you do?
Like I said, I told you, I started this podcast by saying mine was a classic case of being at the right place at the right time. So I think I worked at this law firm called HSB and Partners, which is a regional law firm in Chennai. And I had a senior over there who was brilliant. And I used to work a lot with that senior. And that senior had moved to Amachan when they opened offices in Chennai. And I was looking for jobs and he had recommended me because I worked with him and he got a chance to see that I am pretty dedicated to my job. So that was my step into this national law firm world. And honestly, even I'd never dreamt of being able to get through because it was just so difficult for your CV to even get noticed when you're not from a national law school. So the Amachan experience happened, but that still was not enough for me to move to Bombay. Even though I worked at a name called Amachan, I was based in Chennai. So that was still not enough for me to move to Bombay. And I did try a lot and it just wasn't helping. And then I went for my master's and came back. And that's when my CV started getting noticed because then I had Amachan and then I had Columbia and then I was able to even get through to recruiters to be able to get me interviews at law firms. And then the offers started coming in. So it was a long process. Like from 2011 is when I graduated. And I think 2016 is when I was even able to get people in Bombay law firms to start noticing me. So this is all what I had to do. And then eventually, I made the break into Bombay. So it was very, very competitive.
I'm sure. Now let's explore a more light-hearted question. Do you think contracts are just really long love letters between businesses? If yes, then why? And if no, then also please explain why.
Oh, they would make very unromantic love letters if that's the case. I think no. In my opinion, they're more like prenups that two people get into before they're going to get married because a contract basically lists out anything and everything that could go wrong and how you protect yourself when that happens, right? So it's definitely not a love letter. It's more like a prenup, according to me. Because if I ever got a love letter that looked like a contract, I would probably never date that person. So
Sheldon is definitely out of question then.
yeah, for sure. Yeah. So yeah, they're more like prenups because they list out every single ifs and buts and what's going to happen if this happens and what's going to happen if that happens. So yeah, it's not a love letter according to me.
Okay, well said. And that brings me to a very interesting point. A lot of people in India have this confusion that prenups are legally binding in India as well. If you have knowledge on this, do you want to enlighten our listeners about the legal validity of prenups in India?
So I haven't really worked too much on prenups, but I do know that they're not like legally binding. But I don't have any experience in this area to opine on because,
So the two senses, like prenups are valid in the US, but here in India, they're not valid because in India, marriage is governed by personal law.
Personal law. So, it's not, yeah.
Right. And even if you get married under Special Marriage Act, then also there is no mention of prenup. So again, you don't get validity. And by the way, in India, if your wife and you get divorced, like what happens in the US, she's not going to take half of your wealth, right? Because
Yes.
in the US, there is this concept of marital wealth. So after marriage, whatever both husband and wife has earned, that belongs to both of them. And when there is a separation, obviously that's going to separate it there. But that's not the case here in India.
Yeah. But the thing is, there are a lot of case laws which say that in terms of maintenance and everything, the wife should be able to have the same kind of lifestyle that she had during the marriage. So it's not like you're giving charity in terms of, oh, I'll just give you this much to maintain yourself. You should, there are a lot of case laws to that extent that she is entitled to the lifestyle that she led while she was married.
Yeah, that's what even I read in the.
But again, like there are a lot of case laws and everything, but
yeah,
in India, the thing is to get everything enforced. It's not that easy. Like, yeah.
But yeah, even if she's entitled to same lifestyle, it doesn't mean that she's gonna get half of your wealth. Over there, that's where the negotiations start. Here it is like, okay, she wants to have the same lifestyle. Okay, let's start at 1 lakh per month as maintenance, right? The point where negotiation starts are like completely different. Anyway, both of us haven't worked in family law, so
Yeah.
we should actually shut up and move on to the next question. The next question is more under your alley. What's the most unexpected skill you found to be invaluable as a corporate lawyer?
Okay, that's interesting. I'm discovering new skills that I would need to get better at this profession. One is that you need to have command over the law. Like you need to always be updated on the area of law that you regularly advise on. That's very, very important. Apart from that, it's not just important that, like, for example, I'm a corporate lawyer, so it's not just important that I'm aware of what's happening in company law or foreign exchange laws, but it's also important to be able to know as you get more senior in the profession to like know if there's any changes in some tax laws, because suddenly someone may ask you that. So I think to be updated on the law is very important. Attention to detail is also very important. But more than anything, what I'm realizing now as an in-house lawyer is that you need to be commercially aware. Because as lawyers, like, the contracts sometimes, like I said earlier, we are trying to put in as many worst case scenarios as possible and how to protect your clients or the people you're advising when this happens, right? So as lawyers, sometimes during negotiations, you could just get stuck in a loop, negotiating something, and this could like prolong the process. So when you're commercially aware, you need to take a call to see if you can live with it or not and move on in the interest of the deal and to get the deal done at a good time. So that is, I think, very, very important as a corporate lawyer to be commercially aware.
Well, great answer there. Do you want to know my answer to this question?
What is that?
The skill that I now find invaluable, which I never thought it would, is having the skill to read people.
Read people.
Read people, right?
That's also important.
I'm really bad at it. I'm really bad at it. Like after college, I used to go for interviews and I used to, like, I will come back and say to everyone, like, the interview went really well. And after a couple of days, I'll receive a rejection. So I was really bad at reading people. As a corporate lawyer or whatever you do, as an IP lawyer, as a litigator, right, it becomes even more important. If you are able to understand what's going in somebody's head, it gives you a huge competitive advantage at whatever you are doing.
I completely agree with that, Avinash, because I think as I'm getting older, you realize a lot of your job is actually dealing with people. So when you're good at like people skills, it's like half the work is done.
Right.
Yeah, it's all about that. And you realize that as you get more senior in your career or, as you get older, that it's all about people skills.
Right. And, a very interesting study came out a couple of years back, which said if you compare IQ versus EQ, EQ is a better indicator of your professional success in a corporate life versus IQ. So even though you're not smart, if you have good EQ, emotional question for people who don't know that, you have better chances of succeeding. So work on your people skills. Like that's what I have learned.
Yeah, I completely agree because I think we all have at some point seen that someone could be the smartest in the room, but there could be someone else who shines more in their career because they have better people skills or better EQ, like you said. So that is a very important skill.
Yeah. Even though those people get abused in the office's WhatsApp group, but
Yeah.
does it really matter, right?
Yeah.
Because that happens in every office. Like, they say like, okay, this person got the promotion or got the raise, but he or she didn't deserve it. But a lot of times, I feel that's because of their ability to manage people. But anyway, moving on, the next question is, what's the most common misconception people have about corporate lawyers and what's the reality?
Oh, there are quite a few, but the most common that I always hear is that lawyers are delaying the deal or that they want to prolong the deal. And a lot of people think that the language that goes into contracts, it's unnecessary. So, they just don't understand like why this is required. And, lawyers are often faced with questions like, do we even need this? It's delaying the process, it's delaying the deal. So I think that is not the case. Lawyers are actually trying to protect your interests. Of course, like if something is taking longer than necessary in negotiations, like if your lawyer is negotiating on something and you just get stuck in a loop, then of course you take a commercial decision to live with it or move on, right? But I think this story that's out there that lawyers, especially corporate lawyers, are just out to delay your deal or prolong the process and they're just adding unnecessary language which is not important. I think that's not true. Lawyers are really, really trying to just protect you. Yeah, maybe like, we look at every possible worst case scenario, but I have to tell you that, every clause in a contract, it's put in there because at some point it's happened somewhere in the world and there's actually case law for that. So I think taking all that into consideration is why we try to make an agreement so watertight that there's no room for like misinterpretation. So I would like to make it clear that lawyers genuinely want to protect their clients. But of course, like if something is going in a loop, that's when you have to use your skill of being a commercial lawyer and deciding whether you live with it or move on.
Well said. So, if you could make other departments understand just one particular thing other than what you just said, what would be that one thing? One legal concept, one of the legal procedures, what will be that one legal thing?
So very often we get stuck on like indemnity clauses or representations and warranties. They're all like very heavily negotiated clauses. And while in an acquisition front, like, usually when you acquire anything, like those deals are like several crores that I think when you're working on acquisition deals, people actually take it pretty seriously and they do take what goes into a contract pretty seriously. But I think it's only when we're working on like general day-to-day contracts, like every contract will have an indemnity provision. And that's when, we just get stuck when I'm like dealing with different departments saying like, why do we even need this? Or why are we even asking for it? And it may not even happen. Recently, I think I even had a discussion with like a colleague of mine where they were stuck on this indemnity clause. And I was just like, we put that because there have been instances where it has happened at some point, right? So, tomorrow when someone's coming to you with a claim, you want to ensure that you're properly protected in the document. So I think this is where we're trying to explain. And this is where we get stuck on most of the time in our day-to-day operational contracts, like a service contract, like, consultancy contract. This is the clause that we get stuck on. And this is the clause I'm very often trying to convince my internal teams that we need it and why we need it.
Yeah. And some of my friends who are also entrepreneurs, they also get stuck on this clause for IP assignment. Like, as you rightly said, that until unless there's an acquisition or a merger, nobody cares about IP assignment and indemnity. But
exactly. Yeah.
like people forget that, most of the startups or businesses won't go public, but there's a very good chance that they would be, acquired or merged.
Yeah.
This is something really hard to explain to other parties. Word from non-legal background. So there's a surprise for you. We have a rapid fire round for this podcast. I'm sure you know what a rapid fire round is. So let me just start. First question is, if you could only use one law for the rest of your career, what it would be and why?
Oh my God. Sorry, I'm failing at the rapid fire already.
Absolutely.
Murphy's Law. And I hope that Murphy's Law works in my favor because it's always working the opposite way.
For people who don't know what Murphy's Law is, can you explain?
Oh, Murphy's Law is, when you expect something to happen and the exact opposite of it is what is given to you, right? That's like Murphy's Law is meant to have the exact opposite effect. So I think in my case, like I would want it to work in my favor.
Okay. What is the funniest thing that has happened in your legal career?
Funniest thing has to be I've had like several all-nighters in office. It's just a lot of banter with colleagues. You know, when you're sitting all night working on agreements, you're falling asleep on the document. It's just a lot of like, it's fun too. Like when you're not sleep deprived. Now, when I think about it, it's fun. At that point, maybe it was not that fun, but now it is.
So moving on to the next question. If your life is on the line, which fictional lawyer would you choose to represent you?
My life is on the line, right? So it has to be a
Right.
criminal lawyer. Perry Mason?
Okay. I'm not aware of the person. Can you explain what's the TV show and where?
No, it's like it's a very old,
Okay.
it's like a, yeah.
I haven't seen it. I hope some of our listeners might have. So the next rapid fire question is, if you could acquire any legal superpower, what it would be?
Of photographic memory. Because,
Okay.
yeah, we need to remember a lot. So photographic memory.
Wow, great answer there. Do you think that being a lawyer gives you an edge in winning arguments at home?
No. In fact,
Okay.
I do argue at home,
Right.
but I'm constantly like told that, oh God, stop arguing because you're a lawyer. So it doesn't give me the edge.
Right. If you could enact one ridiculous law
Okay.
that everyone had to follow, what it would be? Mine would be you can't use short phrases. Like you can't use those uncommon terms that oldies like us don't know. Like I'll ban young people from using the shortcuts like TMI or something of that
Oh.
sort.
Mine would be I detest people who cut lines, especially in India. Like people just don't understand the concept of standing in line waiting. I would like to make a law, like nothing bothers me more than someone who cuts lines. Yeah, so it's a ridiculous law, but I would love to make that.
You are my soul sister. Trust me, like in my personal life, even I don't understand why this bothers me so much.
Yes,
And in India, that's absolutely true. Like nobody respects the life. But
that's right.
I'm happy that you will make that law.
Yeah.
Okay. If animals could be litigators and corporate lawyer, which species would be best suited to be a litigator and which species would be best suited to be a corporate lawyer?
I don't know. The only two animals that came into my mind was a shark and an alligator. I mean,
Right.
like a reptile and, an alligator for a litigator and a shark for a corporate lawyer.
Okay. Great answer there. So yeah, that brings the end to the rapid fire round. Did you perform well or did you really fail at it? I let the listeners decide on this. Please comment below.
I don't think I fared very well at the rapid fire.
I'll let the listeners decide. Please put in your comments. So yeah, we just have time for one last question. In one line, what is the best professional advice you have received in your career?
I like to take a little bit of what I've heard or observed from a lot of lawyers that I've worked with in the 10 plus years that I've been in this profession. I think one common theme that I've seen in all of them is that they've always spoken about how you need to work hard, keep persisting, keep on updating and reading. Like in law, you need to keep learning. You may even have to keep learning at like age 60. So very often these days, I think like, especially the current generation, everyone wants like faster results, lesser work hours and everything, right? While I'm all for work-life balance and that is important, I think it's very important to work hard, keep updating yourself on the law and keep at it. Like, you should be willing to pull in those hours to be successful in this field. And this is something that I have seen common across all the lawyers I admire from like my previous jobs and everything, that this is what they've always said. And I've taken it with me.
Great advice there, Sampriti. Thanks a lot for coming on this podcast. It was really interesting, even though you didn't do really well in the rapid fire round. Other than that, is really entertaining. Thanks a lot for joining
Thank
us
you so
today.
much for having me, Avinash. Thank you.
It was our honor. That brings us to the end of this insightful episode with Sampriti Sridhar. We hope you found her insights as valuable as I did. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe to Let's Discuss Cafe for more conversation with incredible professionals like Sampriti. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next time with another engaging guest. Until then, keep learning and stay inspired.